simple one. Do you even lift, bro?
Actually, I've started to. Yep. So
Nice. What prompted you to start?
Making myself get out of bed early in the morning, because if I don't leave the house before 7:30, the entire day becomes a write-off. Really bad.
I know that feeling of like, I don't know if this is if we're on the same wavelength, but when you like, if you get up late, you know, I don't know what you define as late, define it how you want, but you know, when you get up later in the day, and you just sometimes, in my head, if I get up too late, I'm like, nah, well, I've ruined the day. I'm not going to do anything today.
Every time. It's like, honestly, 9 a.m. is like late for me.
I know that even though technically you still got loads of the day left, if you don't get stuff done, I get up and I've been sort of training myself to sing a bit better. And I've been getting up early because that's when I can get the studio. Like there's a studio space at my old uni hires out that I can still kind of access, whether I'm meant to or not. I don't know. But it's always fully booked, so I have to go early in the morning, like 8-9 o'clock. So that's my like get out of bed sort of cue, if you like. But yeah, I know that feeling. Like, so is it more for just like the sense of obligation to get you going in the day?
Well, there's that, and then there's also the just trying to sort my physique out and all that kind of stuff, because I've been like constantly flip flopping between like different methods of doing stuff, and I've finally kind of found my kind of groove with everything. So it's just pretty much every single morning for like the past couple of weeks now. I've just been almost every single day, and
you can't on an audio podcast say every single day I've been, and then people are gonna think, "Oh, work as you do."
Maybe, but yeah, so all of that, and then just alternating between just weights and cardio every single day, and doing like throwing in some like core exercises a bit now and all that kind of stuff. But just until I kind of reach like a base level of like strength and endurance with it, and then I'll start kind of being like, right, I'm going to go super heavy on this day, and kind of, you know.
Do you feel any different? Because obviously, if it's only been a couple of weeks, it's an interesting measure of like, do you feel different right now from even just a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I tend to react like super, super quickly to like any sort of like change in diet or change in, you know, if I then do more exercise or I do less exercise. As soon as my diet goes downhill, productivity disappears. I'd instantly just feel terrible. I have zero energy. Like, I mean, I'll wake up I'll end up waking up a bit later, and you know, I'll be out for the count by like 5 p.m. It's so insane. Whereas now it's like I don't bat an eyelid when it's like 5:30 a.m. and then I can go right up to like 11 midnight, and then just, you know, run on like 6 hours sleep and feel great about it. So I've been like doing like a whole bunch of research on like certain things to do with sleep, and it's like, obviously, you know, you sleep for your body to repair itself, and if your body's kind of in good shape anyway, it has to do less repairing, so therefore you don't need as much sleep technically. So it kind of works like that. So that's why you don't feel too bad when you kind of still get up early even though you've been working out loads, because if you're eating the right stuff, your body's then repairing that. And then if you're not, and then your body's not inflamed if you're not eating like garbage all the time. But so I've just learned the hard way by just putting on loads of weight, losing loads of weight, putting on loads of weight, losing loads of weight, and then now I'm kind of like slowly finding my feet with everything.
It's a weird one where like it's so important for creative people. I mean, it's important for everyone. Like it doesn't matter really. It sounds a bit pretentious or something just to say it's for like only for creative people, but obviously it is super important for like maintaining a healthy mind kind of thing. I know it's a bit of a generic thing, but particularly if you're trying to do something like that.
Yeah, I think people underestimate like how, you know, I mean, that would be my advice for like mainly myself, because I mean, I got myself into some fucking crazy dark and bad places over the past like couple of years, and honestly, for myself anyway, from like personal experience and from a lot of my friends, just making sure you were just like working out and like getting the blood going is helps so much.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like getting out of. I think something that this I guess not. I don't know how to phrase it really, but when it comes to discussing things like depression and anxiety and all these kind of sort of mental health issues that are around today, I do think we too quickly dismiss the importance of things like fitness and routine, diet. Like, I'm not for 1 second saying that fixes all your problems. Like, in my head, I think I don't know how sort of in line this is with what most people think, but in my head, what we should do is, when it comes to things like depression and anxiety, we should say, okay, here's some boxes we need to tick before we start to look at this. We need to get you healthy, get you eating properly, get you getting up at the same time every day. If you still feel really depressed after all of these, then there's some other things we need to start doing. And of course, people that are in seriously dark places need immediate help, right? Like, I'm not dismissing any of that, but I feel like
of course, I completely think the same way. I think it's like, it's. I mean, if you're putting garbage in, you got to expect garbage out. That's basically what it is. I reckon. Obviously, with the kind of within the constraints of, like, it can help to a certain degree, and then of course, some people are kind of prone to the literal chemical imbalance in their brains and all that kind of stuff that causes everything. I myself, I'm lucky to have not had depression, so I can't really speak on that. I think I'd like quite crazy bouts of anxiety. I go through like bouts of anxiety like my cat's just playing over there. I go through like slight bouts of anxiety every now and again. But sorry, I'm just going to move the cat. You just cut this.
You got to introduce the cat. The rule is the cat's got to be on camera. Anyone listening, you're just gonna have to. I'll audio describe the cat for you.
This is Turtle. He's only he's in play mode. He's just not having any of it now. But
how old is he?
Yeah. Oh, he's not even 1, like 8 months old.
Yeah, he looked young.
Yeah. Absolute psychopath.
That's cured.
Yeah. No, it's it honestly, it helps. It helps. I mean, my girlfriend was going through it a while ago, and like getting him like properly helped. Sorry, he's biting. He's biting the cable for the thing. All right.
I'm just waiting for you to drop out.
I know. He's just staring at me. Anyway, but yeah, that hugely helps, and it like, sorry, this cat, man. One sec.
You're all good. I've had various animals. I need to have like a leaderboard of people's pets in the podcast.
I just put him in with my girlfriend.
I was just saying, I don't know if you heard, I was saying like, I need a leaderboard of people's pets in the pod, because I've had like various dogs and cats appear.
Oh really?
Well, it's proper like serious conversation, then like cat.
Yeah, every time. But yeah, we play with him loads, and he's just doesn't stop. But yeah, honestly, back to the topic now. But yeah, no, it's crazy how fast like the changes. I mean, it just helps put you into like a positive mindset if you just go to the gym, get that out in the morning, because then you already feel like you've accomplished something, and then you kind of get addicted to that feeling of being able to check things off and be like, right, I've done this for today, I've done that, and yeah, because I always saw it as just like eating into my day, whereas now, I mean, having done it for like a couple of weeks now, I can't even start my day without it. Which, strangely, going overboard with it actually helped kind of cement it into my habit, rather than kind of what I used to do, where I'd be like, right, I'm gonna make sure I go this day, then miss this day, then do this day, then miss that day. It kind of solidified more of a routine. And
well, it's funny you say that, because like I teach guitar, and like one of the things I say to people when they're trying to learn, like say with improvising, I'm like, okay, you want to you want to start doing more of this technique, or you want to sound more interesting in this particular way, I found the best way is to say, okay, overuse that for like 5 minutes. So say you want to get into like string bending more, like just do some silly string bending stuff for 5 minutes, nothing else. Like, because what happens is if you don't, your brain goes into autopilot and you just start doing all the usual stuff you've done. I noticed that where I was trying to teach people to improvise, and like they would know their scales and stuff, and then I'd say, go on, try some of this, and they go, cool, and then they'll do it for like 20 seconds, and then they're back into like what they did before. Whereas if I say, okay, you can only do this, and I think it's the same principle, like of cementing something, and then it's like, okay, we can kind of lay off the gas a bit now and make it more holistic and actually part of your, in this case, part of the day, rather than just like happening, you know, because obviously you do need a rest. I feel like you do. Maybe you don't need a rest day. Maybe that's just
I think it just like depends on what you're doing, but I've noticed well, I started actually having proper baths and all that kind of stuff, and using Epsom salts and all that, so like dead sore muscles going in, and then the next morning after I've had the bath the night before, it's just like this pain's just been completely alleviated, almost like a miracle thing. It was like lavender oil, Epsom salts, and like rosemary oil as well. And it was just like this crazy like little hack which I think I found online of some like absolutely ripped to shreds guy who's just like, I do this every day, and I was like, why not try it?
Yeah, just use my discount code.
Yeah, no way, it wasn't any of that. It was just some guy just like talking about his diet, and it was like completely whole foods and all that, which is what I'm doing now. There's like barely anything processed, and because I did it not by choice in like the first lockdown, because I was staying pretty much exclusively at my parents' house, and I was just eating whatever my mum was cooking, and my parents are like super healthy, so it was just whole foods, and I was just walking 10,000 steps a day. I wasn't even working out; I was just doing like a bit of yoga, and in like 3 months I dropped 3 stone. And it was just with the whole foods, and my mental health just kind of absolutely skyrocketed, and like any anxiety that I wake up with, because the anxiety that I kind of get is like a lot more in the form of like health anxiety. Like I'll freak out that, you know, I've got a headache here, and you know, I worry about the past health problems that like previous members of my family have had, and that kind of weirds me out. But then getting yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Because what I was gonna say as well was that it's quite common that you hear about anxiety and depression very much being like happening simultaneously in a lot of cases. You know, it's not often that I hear of someone with, for example, depression that doesn't have at least a fairly significant amount of anxiety, and vice versa. Yeah. So it's interesting that you've kind of like. Is that something that, I mean, we can talk about it as much or as little as you like, but
yeah, no, sorry.
I always like to just check, you know, just before I go out delving in, and I just see you hang up like, oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, is that something you feel like you've had kind of the whole time, or is it something that's come along? Or?
Kind of, it's really weird. Like, I think I had my like first bout of it back in college, and yeah, it was just, it came out of nowhere. And then I went from, you know, I was so bad to the point where I was sleeping on a mattress in my parents' room because I couldn't stay in a room by myself and all that kind of stuff. It was horrible, and I was just I was getting to college and then on the verge of like crying my eyes out and just leaving, and I couldn't tell where any of this emotion was coming from. And it was strange because it wasn't social, it wasn't anything like that, because thankfully I've never really been anxious in like any social environment. Like all that sort of stuff doesn't. You know, I'd start a show like Balls of Steel, like, you know, at the drop of a hat. But yeah, no, it was always like health based. It was always kind of, just physical stuff as opposed to like any social sort of instigation.
Because I mean, because the thing is, there will certainly be some people that resonate with that like, that almost, because I think because there's such a heavy emphasis on discussing like, social anxiety and like issue to do with interpersonal things, that actually when it's something that isn't related to them, you might feel a little bit alone in it, because there isn't that kind of same discussion. Like I feel like we're better now than maybe we were at talking about this stuff, but not.
Yeah.
There's still parts of it that are left behind.
Yeah.
I can't resonate in the same way that I've not sort of suffered from that in the same way you have, but I can that idea of, I'm not a socially anxious person, but I do have weird little anxieties that aren't. I wouldn't say I have anxiety, but like weird things. I hate restaurants. Like, I'm not socially anxious. I can chat to you. I don't feel weird about this. But if we were sat at a restaurant, I don't know what it is. It's the formality of it, I think.
Right.
Something clicks and my appetite just goes. And it's not every time, but it's like sometimes I'll just sit there and I won't feel right. And you could put the most amazing, if anything, the better the food, the more I'm like, oh crap, I'm not going to eat this. Like, it's a really odd one. I mean, obviously that's not quite as sort of crippling as various other things could be, but
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. But I mean, this is sometimes what happens whenever I start the podcast. We go down some rabbit hole, and then I look at my notes. I'm like, how do I neatly segue this into something else? Like, one of my other various topics. Luckily your question went on to a nice, neat sort of thing about health and fitness and all that from Do You Lift, Bro?
I'm reading the paper.
Yeah. So, but there's kind of a couple of things that. I know I said before we chatted that I try and avoid the sort of more musical things, but there's a few things I wanted to ask about that are maybe more like, I guess, taking of like looking into sort of how you view these things. Particularly, I was interested in kind of the visual side of things, how that kind of ties in that obviously visuals and music are two very different kind of creative processes. Do you feel like you get into the same kind of headspace for either one, or do you feel, I don't quite know how to describe it, but like, is it a different frame of mind when you're thinking about visuals and photography versus thinking about music?
No, not necessarily, just because I think, I don't know if everyone thinks about this way, but I mean, I know this is going to sound so pretentious, but like, I just think of everything in terms of if it's emotive or not, and that is like the only kind of thing it needs to meet. And I get the same, it's exactly the same feelings that I get from a piece of music that I enjoy. It's exactly the same thing that I get from like some visual art that I enjoy. So they'll both elicit the exact same feelings that then to me meet that criteria of, okay, this is sick. And then it's the same thing when I'm like making anything. I mean, I'm a lot better at the visual side than I am at the musical side. I'm like the slowest writer on the planet. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think they're definitely completely linked. I think I can't get stuck into a musical idea without having like the end name for it, or I can't do a visual idea without. Well, I mean, I can, but I can't do it to like its full potential without knowing exactly what it's going to be for, and that it's definitely going to be used. And that's something which, like, this then kind of involves everyone else in the band. Is we're all slowly like letting go of the idea that anything that we do has to be used, because it can get you like into like a proper negative headspace at the same time. If like, oh right, I've got to do this for this thing, and whatever I make has to be used. And then sometimes it's not what needs to be done for that, and then it's really disheartening to kind of get to the point where it's like, right, well, we all know that this doesn't fit that, and it's it's a bit of a mindfuck. But yeah, ultimately it is the kind of, it's all channeled from exactly the same place, because I see the visuals, I instantly think of the music, and I see the music, and I instantly think of the visual.
So there's a couple of questions I kind of got about that. Remind me, because I've got two questions in my head, and they've literally both just gone. That's just how good I was. They were both fighting each other, and they just went, "No, we both give up." How does my brain even do this? Yeah, because that was one. So when it comes to visual stuff with the band, because you guys have a very particular kind of I can tell there's far more that goes into the look, kind of your visuals than certainly a lot of bands, because obviously you've got that kind of visual background. Do you lead the kind of visual side of things?
I think the idea for like anything visual can kind of come from anyone. In the same way that any idea, both musical and visual, can come from like anyone within the band. You know what I mean? Like for like the next record, we've got like the specific vibe that we want to try and go to, and that came from Kadeem finding this artist and being like, oh, it would be sick to do something like this, and then it'll be, oh, okay, we'll then think about whether we need to outsource it or whether we'd like to try and do it in-house. And then on actually making the things, Eric and I collaborate a lot on everything. So like he'll come up with something, then I'll come up with something, or like I'll take a whole lot of photos, send them to him. He'll kind of like start building stuff, and then we'll just like throw it back and forth, and then eventually we end up with something. But then some things he'll just do, and then other things I'll just do.
Yeah,
because
because I mean, my main question was like, do you because you've got an eye for visuals, do you sometimes ever find it difficult to like give up control, or at least sort of have a discussion about certain visual things when in your head you're like, I know this is the thing that's going to work, when other guys in the band
I think it does. It's because we're like four. I can't remember who. I think someone in the band said it also. Yeah, I think someone in the band said it, where it was just like, it's almost like Loathe is like a group of four would-be solo artists all in a band together, kind of like pushing for like a whole bunch of different things. And I think that's why it ends up being like this crazy thing, is because it'll be, you know, listening from everything to Meshuggah, to the Doobie Brothers, to the Strokes, to, you know, to John Hopkins, to all this kind of stuff. And we're all kind of wanting to pile everything in all the time. And then what kind of steers it is the kind of choice of instruments that we end up using, and that kind of puts it in like an era in our heads, and then that widens the palette because we now know, oh, we can incorporate this kind of sound and that kind of sound. So like the bass palette becomes of an era in a way, and then we kind of take that as if that band was from a different dimension, and, you know, time went off in a different direction. But then when it comes back to the visual stuff, yeah, there's definitely some moments where someone's got like an idea that's really strong, and then not everyone is into it, and then it can kind of get a bit difficult to kind of incorporate everyone's feelings on everything. It's definitely like a minefield to go through sometimes, but I think we're all getting a lot better at being less precious about our ideas. Like I saw this. It was the interview that Joe Rogan did with Ruben, and it was talking about collaboration. And he said, "It's you don't want your idea to win; you just want the best one to win." And I think we're all kind of at that point now where, you know, I'm like, I don't care who does the artwork. I don't care who does what. If it's, you know, if the final artwork is off like a random point and shoot camera that one of us has taken a photo on, as opposed to like, you know, one of us renting out a photography studio for like God knows how much money and spending all this time, and it's just, if the vibe's the vibe with a certain thing, then it's just that. If it's good, it's that, you know?
I think that whole experiment in sort of killing off your ego is just part of, unless you literally sort of have a solo project and all the guys are just sessioning. It's such a massive part of, and I've still not got there. Like, I struggle to sort of hand over control of things. I know that's something, but then equally, I don't know if I do, or maybe the idea's just got to be good enough for me. But it's like, well, what defines an idea that's good enough? Maybe no one else's ideas are good enough for me, and then that's a me problem, you know. Yeah. So I don't know. How have you found that experience of like having to sort of quiet the ego and allow each other to kind of cooperate in that way?
I feel like the realization is the fact that things don't need to be as hard. I feel like it's the same with most bands, but people just make it a lot harder for themselves, but by just kind of taking things personally in certain ways. Because at the end of the day, you know, everyone's trying to get to the same place. It's not like anyone's doing anything in like a malicious way. I mean, at least in this band, there's stories of bands where, people are wanting to like absolutely kill each other. But no, it's everyone in Loathe, we all have like the same goal. We all want the band to be in exactly the same place as what's in each other's heads. And I think just kind of appreciating that a little bit more, and appreciating the fact that, our collaborations in the end are what kind of got us to where we are now. And we're kind of just cutting out the whole part of, oh, this has to be like this has to be like this, and kind of relinquish it. And it's also putting more trust on each other to do the things that we're all best at. I mean, for example, like Eric and Sean have been absolutely grafted away, learning about new mixing techniques and production techniques and recording techniques. I've kind of been away to, getting much better at like photography and all that kind of stuff. And all of our sort of writing styles have like changed massively as well. And so yeah, it's definitely taken like a good kind of injection of trust in each other to kind of move forward with everything. But now we've kind of like hit a good roll of creativity, so we're kind of moving at a nice speed, and everyone's a lot happier than I think we were in like the lead up to making the record and trying to make the creative decisions to kind of choose which direction we were going to go in. I mean, there's still at the moment like a whole bunch of different directions that, we can add to songs that we have, and we're kind of just trying to think about how best to kind of keep it in like the specific world that we're trying to not necessarily move into, but kind of incorporate into the music as well. But that's both visually and musically.
Yeah. And what kind of what is it that, what are the sort of qualities that you would look for to know, for example, with your bandmates or with anyone, like, oh, okay, I can trust this person, regardless of whether it's a creative pursuit? Like, how do you know when that kind of in your own head, when, okay, yeah, I can trust this person with some of the weight that would be on me here in this band?
I think it's definitely like once someone's kind of shown again and again that they're kind of like delivering on something. I mean, we're not necessarily the most organized band at all, but I think we've all kind of proven to each other that in our kind of respective fields, we can kind of, I mean, not even that, like everyone kind of does everything within the band. But I think that we know that any one of us is kind of capable of coming up with a visual idea or a musical idea and kind of pushing through with that. But what really makes it Loathe is when it kind of everyone has like a little bit of a say on like certain sounds and like adding certain parts here. Because it can literally take the addition of like a synth playing a specific chord at like a certain time, and it just changes the whole tune into like, okay, that's Loathe now. Like we've had it with a couple of songs that we're working on now, where like there'll be like just one moment that just changes the entire song. I mean, like we had one the other day. We were finishing off, and it was just like, I mean, Eric and Sean had basically been working on it the whole time, and then I kind of came into like, this was a while ago now, but I said the other day, it was a while ago, and there was just this one chord with like this crazy effect that we put on it, and it was just like, it was an idea that I wasn't necessarily like 100% on, and then just this one tiny chord. It's not just the chord, but it was like the way it was executed just completely opened up the whole song, and it was just so weird. But,
I know that feeling, but more so in the studio than anything. What's interesting though is talking to you, like you guys have kind of a somewhat, there's a bit of mystique around your band, not quite like sort of Sleep Token levels of, but there's a certain element, looking at visually and just, I don't know, just kind of at first glance, there is a bit of like, I guess mystery is the main word, really, it seems. But what kind of occurred to me just as you were sort of smiling through that and like saying, oh, it was really cool, we found this, that and the other thing. Do you ever worry about losing maybe a sense of connection with fans through being a bit more sort of, I don't know the word, like I said, mysterious sounds like a bit of a cheap word, but like, and for the record, that's not a criticism, that's more just like...
No, I completely get it. I think when it comes to like the shows and everything, we're all super approachable. We'll say hi to anyone. we're kind of like we're kind of almost a bit too easy to find when we're at shows, because we have like loads of friends coming to like every show, and we're kind of always about anyway. So I think it's like what mystique is kind of held up online is like completely dropped when it's at a show, and I think in a strange way that almost makes it more human, because it's almost just like back in the day. It's just like before social media. It's like you'd know about that. You'd be able to like search them up on YouTube, but they wouldn't be as reachable as most bands are now. But then it's kind of reversed at the show, where it's not often that you won't see us at all before we go on stage. And I mean, that's not intentional. I think we are just like quite sociable people. So I think it's kind of made up in a sense for at the actual shows.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of framing it. Like, I agree. I think that's a cool way of looking at it. Like, because I was watching your set, Outbreak, and that's kind of what occurred to me is like, you know, sort of to compare it with, I know Sleep Tokens, again, it might feel like a bit of a cheap comparison, but like, not cheap, like they're a great band, but I mean, it sounds like
I go.
coming from the same kind of scene, if you like. I don't know why that was just the one. I guess, well, producer in that, I guess there's something common, but that kind of difference in that, you know, I saw people jumping on stage and like at your typical kind of hardcore shows and stuff. Yeah. People are going, and that was, I found that kind of, I don't want to say odd because it was cool, but you know what I mean? It did strike me as like, oh, hang on, that doesn't line up with like what I've seen to this point, which is really interesting. Didn't have much of a on that.
I mean, we always kind of take inspiration from like the album campaigns and how the rollouts are from, you know, rap artists and all that kind of stuff. So like they'll pop up out of nowhere, or take someone like Adele or something like that. I mean, I know we're not at that level, but we really like how they pop up, put out a record, do a huge tour, maybe one or two tours depending on whatever, and then they just disappear for ages again. And you don't know where they are, you don't really know what they're doing. I mean, I know like we're on Instagram every now and again, all that kind of stuff, but I think just that level of not necessarily a boundary, but kind of, I don't know. As we're getting older, I think we kind of want to disappear, reinvent ourselves, and kind of come out, present it all, be like, oh, here we go, here's this, here's that, and then do the same thing again, just disappear, reinvent ourselves, and then come back out again, as opposed to kind of letting social media be a sort of running commentary of like all our lives. I mean, I know some people might be into it, and I think for some bands and for all that kind of stuff, it kind of helps. But I think with us, I feel like for a start, I feel like we're more of like an album band than like a singles band. I feel like it's more a case of, you know, you put on the whole record and you kind of listen to the whole thing, which is not, I'm not necessarily saying that's like a better thing than any band that's kind of more reliant on singles. But I think it's just the kind of artists and the way in which certain artists do things we're a lot more of a fan of than how things have become now. I mean, granted, we've done the whole single thing for like, we did it for the last record and all that kind of stuff. But I think going forward, we're going to try and like change things up a little bit in that regard.
Because this kind of all ties in for me mentally when I'm trying to sit here and think, you know, what do I say to you kind of thing. I don't sit there kind of doing that, but obviously I do in part, especially because it's on Zoom, you kind of have to think about like, what am I going to say to this person next? But, it kind of, for me, there's like a mental tie between your sort of, you were talking about like, oh, I don't like writing something unless it's, or having the feeling of having to use everything, almost being sparing with your music. It feels like that kind of ties in kind of almost with this sparing social media presence, you know, and that you're kind of, it sounds like kind of, again, this might just sound like me psychoanalyzing the whole thing, which I'm not qualified for, but it sounds like that kind of perfectionism that sometimes it like can do great things, because you guys have got this really cool kind of, like I said, mystery. Do you think that's rooted in a sense of perfectionism? And I'm sorry if it probably sounds a bit critical, it's really not meant to be.
No, Kind of. I mean,
I get, because that makes it sound like you're not doing it on purpose. Like, I know,
no.
I understand
I mean,
it. I hope that comes across.
It's really weird. I think like, I've got like, I always have like so many thoughts wanting to come out, and then I kind of end up divulging and kind of on a whole. Ignore what I just said, but
Cut.
but oh God, how do I answer that? Hang on.
Does that mean it was a good question or a really shit one?
No, good. I'm just trying to think. There's like a whole bunch of like different answers that I can kind of go down. I think in regards to like the social media stuff, I feel like it started out as a thing that we were kind of being intentional with, being, you know, kind of we're going to kind of try and hold up some mystery, but then that kind of then became us, in like that kind of actually became us then. So, and then as kind of time went on, we kind of had like a bit more of a distaste for social media type of thing. I mean, like I don't think any of us would be on it if we didn't need it, and we'd just be like focusing on ourselves and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to like the perfectionist side on things, I think personally, here he is. Personally, I mean, if I'm trying to come up with an idea and it instantly doesn't sound like it could be on a hit record or something like that, I just end up binning it half the time. So there's very, very few ideas that I kind of end up sticking with. And I guess it's the same visually, but and I'm pretty sure it's the same with the other guys. Like, I think Sean in particular has kind of built up like a crazy bank of ideas, and so has Eric. But I think, yeah, we're definitely all perfectionists when it comes to that kind of stuff, like crazy details that people wouldn't even notice. Like, we're always in there and kind of, you know, tweaking and everything. But I think we're starting to like figure out exactly where the roadblocks that we put for ourselves are, and we're kind of like slowly removing them one by one. Because I think we didn't want to end up being like the band that like thought itself to death. we could easily end up being, you know, end up going that way. But yeah, no, it's that ties in with everything, where we're kind of getting to the point where none of us are kind of, we have to use every single idea that we've come up with, and, you know, this has to be perfect in this way, and this has to be edited exactly this way. And we're kind of like a lot more open to things becoming a lot more natural now. And I think that's also down to the fact that we're all a lot better at our own instruments than we were a year ago, 2 years ago. And it's kind of, we can just rely on things being more natural now.
Yeah, it's like I said, I just find it, I still sort of continue to find it interesting, the sort of just talking to you about it quite candidly, because I think that's something that, like I said, it kind of subverts my expectation of what, you know, I didn't expect you to be some like dark, mysterious figure, like, you know. Yeah. But it's just interesting to hear it, you know, from that perspective. Funnily enough, you know, I said I forgot about one of my questions earlier. I've remembered it now, and it actually ties in exactly with what you're saying. You know how you were saying, like, you end up binning ideas before they're even done, because you're like, no, it's not going to work. I'm so guilty of that. Like, it's absolute curse. I think it's a blessing and a curse, because then you hopefully don't turn out too much crap, basically. But like, I've tried to allow myself to just see more ideas through, because I find even just the process of doing that really useful. But like, yeah, there's something about, I don't know what it is, and I realised, it's funny we talk about this, because only today I had a sort of realisation of how I could maybe start to operate, and I'd be interested to know if you think this would work for you. I don't know, but I have this need when I write music where I cannot write a simple piece of music to start with. I can write a complex part and then step back and go, okay, what's like the fundamental part of this? Let's make this a bit more like song-worthy, basically, rather than just a guitar wankery. And so I was realised earlier, I was like, man, if that's what I need to do, why don't I just do that? Because I can come up with some quite complex parts, but then they please all the guitarists in the room, but then, well, some of them, maybe not all of them, you know, but they please a good deal of the guitarists, but then no one else is interested in, you know, this stupid crap on the guitar. They want to hear a song. So I want to be able to do that. And that's what I want to hear. I don't want to I'm not into instrumental guitar as much maybe as just like band music. And so I said to myself today, I was like, well, why don't I just allow that to happen rather than trying to avoid that? So allow that perfectionism, that precision in everything, but then actually just step back from it and go, okay, well, what's that core little melody? What's the good part of this that I can actually turn into a song? And I realized this earlier. It's like I wrote a song not so long ago. It originated from a very complex, for me anyway, finger style part that I then fleshed out into some heavier chorus ideas, and like it never gets too riffy, but it's always quite like busy. And then I suddenly realized like the worst part of the whole song was the bit I started with, which I just I don't know if any of this kind of
I definitely get that. I get that a lot more on like a visual level. So like I mean, like today I was working on a whole bunch of things, and like the first thing that I did, which I was just like amazing, I was just like perfect, love that. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done. I then just continued, and then like 5 or 6 ideas into it, which was like 7 hours in, I was just like, actually that first idea that I was like super proud of, I'm just like, I actively hate that now. I was like, delete. But yeah, I don't know whether deleting it's like the best way to go, but I think an obsession with like a tidy hard drive is wins a lot of the time. So yeah, should probably get a bigger hard drive and just store everything really. But
well, I suppose for perspective, in terms of do you delete stuff, like I remember once I thought I had so many ideas, just little doodles, kind of, you know, like guitar ideas saved on my PC, and I thought I'm going to go back through all of them and just tidy this up and just go, you know, bin, keep, whatever. I kept one. Like, you know, because I listened back and I was like, what was I thinking? Like, it's not bad, but I just don't actually know what the train of thought was at the time. I didn't know, did I want that to go heavier or softer, or like, did I want this to be a stompy riff or like a winding kind of thing? You just don't know because you're not in the headspace. And I guess it's the same with visuals. So I kept one, which funnily enough, I really like. But I guess that was, I think the thing is I kind of already remembered that in my head anyway. So
no, I had the same thing the other day again with another musical piece. I did it, was dead happy with it. And then I just kind of listened back to it like the other day and I was just like, it sounds like a horrific indie tune. And I was thinking, I was like, this is actually sick. I even got my housemate in there and he was just like, oh yeah, nice. And then I was thinking, on what planet was I to just be listening to this and thinking it was cool? Like, I don't even think it was like my opinion was that it was bad. It was like absolutely just fundamentally terrible. But, yeah. I know everyone has those ideas, but I think, again, that's another thing where the whole idea of not having to use absolutely everything kind of comes into play, where I don't feel so bad for coming up with like shit ideas or anything, which I think is rubbish anymore. Because, you know, you'd come up with something and be like, oh God, I'm terrible. I can't do anything. How have I made some sort of career out of this? Imposter syndrome kind of creeps in. And again, I mean, I'm by no means like the main musical writer in Loathe or anything, but like it's you know, it gets to the point where I'm just like, you know what am I doing? Sat here, you know, trying to write this, and then a whole day will go by, and I've got like a MIDI region inside Logic, and then like, I mean, I know recently I got in my head so much about it to the point where I forgot that that can and does happen to other people. And I think I was chatting to Sean about it the other day. He's like, well, you know, like, same thing with me. Like, I'll go a whole day and there'll just be no idea there. I think that's the hardest thing, and that's the toughest thing when it comes to like deciding to do that, or kind of, you know, having to go off and make money in other areas of my life and all that kind of stuff. That's where the decision's like really tough, is because with the music and that, you're not guaranteed to, you know, you can spend a whole day working on like a photo shoot or something and know you're going to get paid this amount. Whereas when it comes to the music side of things, spend the whole day and end up with absolutely nothing. But then I guess that whole kind of journey towards reaching whatever you're going to make, which you're going to enjoy, I don't know whether it's that close. I mean, I don't know whether it's you have to work through those ideas or whether it's just by chance you sit down where the kind of cutoff point. I don't know where people's cutoff points are, but where they can just sit down and be like, right, today's not going to work. But I think I'm too stubborn for that. So I'll sit down and I'll just hours and hours and hours and hours. I'll just be like playing keys or something like that, and then sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes something does.
It's really tricky because there is that like opportunity cost of like you start an idea and like the longer I work on this, it's like I've invested time now. So if I give up on this idea, I think mentally you almost can get a bit. Sometimes you need to just go, you know what, I spent 3 hours on it, but it's not any good.
Yeah.
Like, and I often find, I don't know about you, but I often find those ideas, I might bin that idea, but there's like a tiny little technique in there. There'll be something that I like thought was good, but I just didn't do it well in that idea. I found with my old band that ended up making one of the choruses for one of our songs where it was like a drum challenge or something that someone put out. I think it was Ola England, you know him? He put out like a drum challenge. I remember just thinking, I was trying to do the Instagram guitar thing a bit, and I was like, I'll do that. And I turned out just a load of shite, basically. But I came up with a cool little chord movement that it didn't even do the same chords in the song, but I just moved through them in the same sort of way. It's like, oh, that worked, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a weird one. But I mean, there's in terms of like the sound you guys get, it's another thing that I was saying to the last guy actually, that I always like it when this happens, when I've got a list of things to talk about and we end up just kind of going through them anyway. So you talked about how you're more of like an album band. Obviously it's not how you have to be listened to, but you're not maybe not quite to the degree of like Tool or someone where like you know, like they'll sort of crucify you if you don't. But maybe that's a bit harsh on them, but the thing that kind of struck me was that like the appeal in your music, it's if you take like modern metalcore or something, for example, like out the gate it's just like, you know, stompy riff, guitars all over the place. Like I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean busy and like in your face. And don't get me wrong, you guys have some in your face moments, but like it very much feels like kind of I hear the song and I go, right, I need to listen to that again. And I mean that in a good way because it's intriguing. But then obviously it raises the question of how do you, well, I suppose, do you think about it at all? But if you do think about it, how do you go about kind of creating something that's intriguing and just musically sound, that isn't maybe doing the kind of fast food sort of thing that some of this sort of modern metalcore is doing?
I think it's just applying methods of recording and using equipment that you wouldn't normally find in that sort of style anyway. Because I mean, for example, we were using this one Fender. I mean, so we were using this one Fender amp, and it wasn't really an amp that you'd use for anything heavy at all, but we were running all these kinds of distortions through it and whatnot. And then we just tested out like a PV 6505, Eric and I did. And it was just like, oh, this is like the classic sort of metal amp that kind of does everything you need for all that kind of stuff. And we were just like, that sounds like complete shit. And then we kind of go, to this one kind of more jazzy sort of amp, but then be running like crazy, like I said, just mad distortions and that through that. And it was doing exactly what we wanted it to, but I don't know, it's really mad, but especially with like how we're kind of approaching all the new stuff, or how we've kind of approached all the new stuff in terms of like mixing, things take up different frequency ranges, or like not in the same way that metal does. So that kind of informs everything else that's going to go around the tune. So I think to anyone who kind of just listens to the sort of more heavy stuff, more kind of classic heavy stuff, that will sound very different. Whereas I think if someone's coming from a more pop side or a more kind of 70s sort of side, they'll almost find it easier to take in like the mix and that we're going to go for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I get where you're coming from, just from having listened to I've listened more than a few times, but it would only take a few listens to get that. Yeah. I totally get what you're saying, because I mean that's again, like I didn't want to get too technical about mixing and it's interesting. I don't want to be like, so about your tones, because could ask you that any day of the week. Oh well, anyone could. But yeah, I thought that is something that did stand out on,
Yeah.
first listen. If someone said, okay, what do you, what are the first three things that it makes you think of it? I was kind of like, okay, there's something different going on. I mean, so like, because you guys worked with George Lever, didn't you? Is that right?
Yeah, he mixed the he mixed I Let It In, and we kind of gone through a few different people. I mean, we had this crazy writing session, like this rush to get the record finished, at our old guitarist's house, and I think there was like, I think Eric and I especially, I think we were up for like over 48 hours at one point. We went absolutely mental, but yeah, we were getting everything done then. And then, but yeah, even that, like all the methods that we were using to record everything, all the amps, all the kind of stuff was just like completely different. But then we kind of just had to succumb to the fact that we just weren't going to get the correct mix. And then so we went through like one or two other mixers, and then eventually went to George, and he did a really good job on the mix and all that. And then, but yeah, I think yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think I assume he had a pretty tough job doing it, because there were just so many layers and like loads of like crazy percussion stuff in there and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was crazy. But just to go back onto the whole thing where I'm talking about using different equipment and all that kind of stuff, I think I'm talking about, I guess, what we're kind of doing now. So like it's not as much on I Let It In. Like I Let It In's definitely a lot more in the kind of heavy world, and then we're just expanding sounds again for this next one.
Yeah, this it's an interesting one, because like for me, my creative interests I have quite a sort of like meat and potatoes approach to like sounds. I'm quite sort of down the line, heavy guitar, drums, bass, vocals. I like all the extra kind of things like strings and I don't want to say more generic synths. That makes it sound a bit boring, but you know what I mean. More, I guess just, I don't know how to put it. My brain doesn't go to these outside kind of sounds. I love hearing them, and I think that's possibly one of the things that I would admit to sort of missing in my own sort of musical palette. So it's always interesting hearing people talk about like the sonics rather than just the music, rather than like the sort of harmonic and melodic content and stuff. What do you think it is that drew you guys to that? Was it a need to kind of be different to other metal bands, or did it come from like necessity, or have you guys always just been interested in that?
I think individually, I think before, I mean, myself as well, before I'd even known the guys, I think we'd all been drawn to just like different sounds and anything. I mean, personally, I'm always a fan of like, you get told not to do something a certain way, and you're like, right, well, I'm going to make this, I'm going to make that way that you told me not to do work. So, but no, I think with us, for like most of the songs, if you took away the guitars and the bass and the drums, you'd almost have the whole entire song underneath there as well. So it's almost like composing the song twice. But and then obviously eventually we'd like to expand to having like nothing on backing tracks and like a whole kind of big band playing with us, all the crazy sounds, like the extra percussion bits, the extra synth parts, the extra vocal parts, all that stuff that's kind of not possible with just us four on stage. But yeah, I think I don't know how far down the line that is, because that will obviously depend on stage size and budget and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think we instantly default to wanting to hear a specific weird sound, and it's for me personally, usually it's a weird sound that then sparks off any sort of musical idea.
That's an interesting, because my brain just is the complete opposite to that. Where like I need to hear the music and then I can go, let's put a like wacky effect on that or something. I feel like I don't know. Maybe I should take a leaf out of your book. Maybe that'd be interesting. I need to get some inspiration.
It's ages of just like clicking through presets on Omnisphere and being like, okay, Omnisphere or any sort of thing, and being like, okay, that sounds cool, and then making it sound absolutely nothing like it sounds on that patch. But you're just going to end up with something that you would have not thought up before you sat down to do it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes that's when it's toughest to write. Is when you sit down with like a kind of specific emotion that you want to get out, and then it kind of ends up veering a different way. And that's what is toughest, because sometimes you really like the idea that that's kind of presenting itself to you, but because you've not sat down with that specific emotion to write with, I can't kind of carry on with it, because it's just like, oh, hang on, this sounds a bit, dreary, or it sounds happy and I don't want to write anything happy, but it sounds really good, but I can't do it justice because I'm not feeling what is happening there. And I think that's also what leads to like everything being really eclectic, because we never want to be that band where you put on the record and then by 3 songs in, you know exactly what's kind of coming next. So I mean, like, that's why kind of, you'll be 3 songs in like a heavy record, and then you get a tune like To a Mirror, so it will kind of completely throw you off guard if you're listening to the record for the first time. And people like Devin Townsend, instantly a whole bunch of different like a crazy like emotional palette on like most of his records, or like rather he'll do whole records of like certain things, but our output is not like Devin Townsend. So, but yeah, I think that's it. And I think forcing any sort of emotion is something that I think puts us off doing anything straight away.
That's
just bad. And it's really weird because, and honestly, in terms of from a mental health standpoint, I think forcing yourself to kind of write a certain style or a certain or to a certain emotion when you're not feeling that way, I genuinely feel like that does some sort of like damage to you. And then it comes with the lyrics as well. Like if you're not feeling a certain way, but yet you're still writing kind of classic metal lyrics or classic whatever sort of thing, it can, especially when it's about something negative, when you're not feeling that way, I feel like that's when it's like most damaging. Of course, if you're writing about something happy and you're trying to pull yourself out of like a kind of a rut or like a low state or something like that, then that's a bit different. But yeah, I think we're all very much trying to preserve our kind of mental states and all that kind of stuff. But when the emotion's there to write something tragic or kind of like sad or all that kind of stuff, then it will come out and it'll be like, right, nice, I'm in that headspace and I can do it. But there's just no point in forcing out an emotion that's not there, and that can lead to like songs and ideas taking ages to write. But yeah, I know that was very long-winded. I hope it made sense.
That's perfect. I love long-winded. It's the whole point. It's the whole reason we're sat here. I only just realised the times I've managed to introduce a time difference on my clock, because currently my clock says that it's backwards 9:35, but it's actually 10:35. So it ran out of battery today, so I changed it, and obviously apparently decided, I don't know if I've just missed a load of engagements today or something. I hope not. But yeah, I mean, speaking of, and actually, to be fair, that is a really good note to finish up on, because it's a teachable moment, I think, without sounding too pretentious. But like, I think it is true. Like, I think that's a really interesting point about not forcing. I mean, on the mental health side, but actually purely just on the musical side, I've tried to force ideas when, or I've tried to say, oh, I'm going to write like this today, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it gets you out of a rut, But if you write like, okay, I have to write like this. I have to create this sort of type of output, you can end up in quite a negative space, I find. So I think that's, it
becomes more relatable as well, just because if you're, obviously some people might feel sad a lot of the time, all that kind of stuff, but I think on a record, if you're introducing like that, the whole spectrum of emotions that people feel, it instantly becomes more relatable. And I think that's the whole point of music, isn't it?
Connect with people. I suppose it's yeah. Wow. Well, we've figured out music. That's a good place to end. So I need a question for the next guest to start the podcast. We've covered all sorts of stuff, so hopefully that gives you hopefully maybe that doesn't help at all. And then also I need an artist that you want to. I could have easily gone on for another. Things I'm at the point where I'm like just starting to get warmed up. So no, I mean it's I feel like it's one of those ones where I've done longer ones before, but I feel like it's good to kind of leave them wanting more of it. Leaves a bit of intrigue. And also my brain is, I got up early this morning and my brain is saying, I need to go to bed now. So you should have caught me an hour earlier. Actually, I even offered to, so that's my own damn fault. Oh well. But no, we'll have to again, like I've been saying to people, I want to get people on and then get them back. Like I'm not just interested in like saying hello and then right, see you later.
Yeah.
Thanks for being
Oh yeah, I'm more than up for it.
Wicked, man. Yeah, we'll do it again sometime. Catch up when you'll probably have a lot more to talk about as well in terms of
definitely.
Where you're at, as in that's so insulting, isn't it? You have a lot more to talk about next time, blimey. Yeah, you know what I mean. You have like, I guess we're kind of getting close to the point where there'll be things you can't talk about, like you said.
Yeah.
So, if you could ask a question for the next guest,
where do you see yourself in 5 years?
It's a good
or
one.
10 years. Let's go 10 years, a bit longer.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. It's pretty open ended as well. Where do you see yourself in? Yeah, it's amazing how. So that's quite like an open ended question. I've had a few where I thought they were quite open ended, and then I'll get like the most literal response to that question. So where do you see yourself in 10 years? Well, be about 10 years older, and yeah, no. To be fair, the people that have done that, there's a couple that come to mind actually, we had really good conversations. So don't judge a book by its cover, I guess. And if you have anything you want to like plug and promote to the world, then have at it.
Not yet.
Not yet. Watch this space.
Not yet.
That's perfect. Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed it.
Same.